Welcome back to Film Snob HQ. The road to Avengers Doomsday is very close to the end, actually. There's only a handful of projects to go. Some of them haven't even been released at the time of this recording. It's currently May, so Spider-Man Brand New Day hasn't come out yet. Vision Quest hasn't come out, and of course Avengers Doomsday hasn't come out. So I've only got a small handful of projects to go. Next up is a series I'm a huge fan of. I was a fan of the original series when it was on Netflix, and honestly, I was a bit worried going into this without doing the Netflix watch. But now, being just on the Marvel train, since 1986 and not touching the Netflix stuff, I actually think the show does a very good job of setting up what it's all about and introducing you to characters, even if you haven't watched the original show. I am, of course, talking about Daredevil Born Again, Season 1. So I knocked that out in a couple of days. And I didn't do the Netflix series. I said from day one I wouldn't touch the Netflix shows because they're kind of canon, kind of not canon. I guess they are canon technically, but if I had to watch Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Defenders, and Punisher, that's 6 shows. They've all got a minimum 2 seasons except for Defenders. I wouldn't be up to phase 3 yet. I would be so far behind because there's 13 hours per series. I wasn't doing that. So I went into Born Again knowing that I might be on the back foot, knowing that I might not have the preparation and all the information I need, even though I've watched Daredevil before on Netflix multiple times. Daredevil's my favorite character. I love Daredevil. Born Again does a really good job of reintroducing the world to existing fans, but also setting up the world for fans who haven't watched any Daredevil before. You will get more out of it from watching the Netflix series, but you can watch it without, and they do a pretty good job. So, where we pick up the first scene of Season 1, we're going to spoil everything. It's Nelson, Page, and Murdoch. Matt Murdoch, Foggy Nelson, and Karen Page walking away from their law firm, heading out to have drinks at Josie's. Josie's is a staple of the Daredevil world, both in the comics and in the TV show. And they're celebrating an early victory. It hasn't quite been announced yet, but Foggy's on something big, and he reckons he's going to absolutely kill it in the courthouse in the next couple of days. When there's a sudden attack on the bar, Bullseye shows up. Bullseye, who we last saw in Season 3 of Daredevil, has been hired by someone. We're not quite sure yet, but he's been hired, and he basically starts shooting up the joint. But in particular, he's been hired to assassinate Foggy Nelson. So the first scene of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 is the murder of Foggy Nelson. Now, thus far in the TV show, 2 seasons in, he has not returned. It does look like a permanent death. However, in the comics, he does come back. He was never truly dead. And I'm still... Look, the hand is coming up in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Who's to say there isn't a little bit of resurrection magic in the air? We'll find out. So the show is a bit of a Frankenstein series, and a lot of people acknowledged that when it first came out. And even the showrunners and Kevin Feige came out and said, look, they shot a whole season. They didn't like the tone of it. They didn't like the way it worked. Not every character could come back. They couldn't bring back Punisher originally. Vanessa was recast because the original actress wasn't available at the time. So they actually scrapped pretty much everything except for one episode, really, I believe, which was the bank heist episode, which is a bit of a palate cleanser in the middle of the season. So the first few episodes is about Fisk running for mayor, establishing himself as the mayor of New York. Matt Murdock has since retired as Daredevil. He is simply a lawyer by day, and he's now in a relationship with a psychiatrist. And right at the end of the first act of the series, we're introduced to the villain Muse. Muse is a terrifying character from the comic books. He's an artist. His mask is absolutely terrifying. It's just a big white hood with blood stains over the eyes. And he paints murals all over the city, but he mixes the blood of his victims into the paint. So he's kind of set up quite early in the series, but then he disappears for a little bit and then resurges later in the show. And his arc is wrapped up quite quickly. I know fans were disappointed by that, but Muse is not one person. There are multiple Muses, and if you've watched Season 2, you know what's going on there. We'll save that for my Season 2 review. Eventually, we also have the trial of Hector Ayala, who is the White Tiger. So he witnesses some police brutality. He gets involved. One of the policemen accidentally falls off the platform of a station, is hit by a train, and he's framed for the murder of it. We're introduced to some really great dirty cops in this series, really great characters, just absolute pieces of work that you love to hate. And you get to see Matt Murdock, not even Daredevil, Matt Murdock, a blind lawyer in an abandoned apartment, beat up 2 cops, which I would not normally enforce the beating of 2 cops, but these cops are real nasty, and it's kind of very vindicating to see that happen. Hector is then murdered by someone dressed as the Punisher, which brings Frank Castle back to town. And also Hector's niece, who's going to take over the mantle of White Tiger at some point, ends up being abducted by Muse because she's investigating his disappearance. And that forces Matt Murdock out of retirement. He puts on the Daredevil suit. And we get some really great Daredevil action. In the Netflix series, he wasn't able to be so acrobatic. They were trying to keep it very grounded. First scene, with Foggy's murder, you've got him, using his billy club to flip all around and do acrobatics. We get a lot more acrobatics in this one. So it's grounded and serious and dark, but there's a bit of that comic book flair as well. And then the third act of this show is the crumbling of Matt Murdock's relationship, him really sinking back into the Daredevil moniker. He comes to a fight with Wilson Fisk. Vincent D'Onofrio returns as Wilson Fisk, obviously. He ends up protecting him when Bullseye breaks out. And then it sets up season 2 with Wilson Fisk basically locking down New York. He's put martial law over New York, and he's got the anti-vigilante task force. It's a very setting up what seemed to be the Devil's Reign comic book line. If you've ever read Devil's Reign story, it's a really wonderful storyline where Wilson Fisk introduces an anti-vigilante task force. He locks down New York, but he employs villains to kind of keep New York in check. Obviously, they didn't have all those villains at their disposal, or they just decided to keep it a little bit simpler. He's using the police force instead. But we're going to talk about that more when we get to season 2. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I know people do prefer the Netflix shows to this first season. I love this season. I love Charlie Cox back as Matt Murdock. He's the best casting for Daredevil we've had. I love Ben Affleck, but Charlie Cox gets a lot more to do, and he gets to play the colors and shades of Daredevil quite well. D'Onofrio absolutely kills it as Kingpin. Again, I could not imagine anyone else in the role. We've had a couple. We had Michael Clark Duncan. We've had Liev Schreiber in the animated Spider-Man film. But for my money, D'Onofrio is the best one. John Bernthal returns as the Punisher. Deborah Ann Waller is back as Karen Page. Wilson Blethell is back as Bullseye. It's the full cast returns. It has a rocky start. It takes a little while to find its way, but I just look at it as 3 stories in a season. If you look at those 3 stories, the Hector Ayala story, the Muse story, and then the setting up of martial law story, it works quite well. We'll talk more about season 2 when we get to it, but I really enjoy it. As a Daredevil fan, I can forgive the sins that of the show because it's just so good to see the gang back. It's violent, it's bloody, it's full of cursing. It seems like Deadpool and Wolverine really opened the door for them to get a lot more mature content out, and this is the best thing they've done. For my money, both season 1 and season 2 of Deadpool, with that mature content, they're really leaning into it, and it's fantastic. I love this. This was a welcome and much needed change for me. As I've talked about in the last few videos, I've been getting tired watching all these Marvel things, but Daredevil really put a spring back in my step and made me very excited to finish this off. I'm almost done. In terms of returning characters, I think Daredevil should show up in Secret Wars or Doomsday. I hope he does. Fisk, I think it would be interesting to bring him in. I've talked about him a little bit as well. The Punisher, I would love to see him. I guess we'll know more in a few months with Spider-Man Brand New Day, unless it's already out by the time this video drops, but we'll find out when that movie comes out, what's going on with him. Bullseye, it seems like, well, we'll save it for season 2 discussion, but it seems like he's got his own future kind of set up as well, and he might be coming back in Doomsday and Secret Wars. That is Daredevil Born Again Season 1. Next up is Thunderbolts.